Hey, can you guys hear me? Cool. Okay, so can I get my slides, please? We'll get there. Anyway, I'm Renato. I'm a senior user experience researcher at YouTube. And I want to start by thanking all the organizers of this event for having me here today. It's great to be back here at my alma mater because I studied aesthetics and engineering here as an undergrad, and I then went on to get my PhD in computer science under the supervision of Professor Miguel Nussbaum, who very kindly, without me knowing, showed up today. So a shout out to him for coming to support his former student. So I want to talk about my work at YouTube, and I'm going to start by asking you a question. Raise your hand if you've watched a YouTube video. Right? Okay, lots of hands. Well, we're in really good company because YouTube has over 1 billion users. And that means it's almost 1/3 of the people on the internet. And let me ask you a second question. Throughout this talk, I'm going to say a lot YouTube creator, and I'm going to define that now as someone who uploads content to YouTube, someone who uploads video to YouTube. And so here are 3 examples of YouTube creators that we're actually going to discuss later during my talk. And so let me ask you, raise your hand if you actively subscribe to, or you're aware of, or you really like the content of a particular YouTube creator. Okay, lots of hands too. Well, I'm part of a team at YouTube whose job it is to listen to our users worldwide. And to give you some perspective on that scale, YouTube is localized in 88 different countries across 76 different languages. And so when you're designing at that scale, inevitably there are some things that will not follow processes that are cookie cutter. And that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about how my work at YouTube has made me rethink what I understand to be user experience research. And so let me start by the end. This is the latest project that I've worked on at YouTube. It just launched September 13th. I'm really lucky because I got to see this project, to work on this project from the very beginning all the way to its launch in September. It's called the Community tab. Through this Community tab, what we've done is we've enabled YouTube creators to interact with their audience and to engage their audiences through mediums that aren't exclusively video. Through the Community tab, YouTube creators can post text, links, images, animated GIFs, and also a special type of video that isn't the same as their main YouTube uploads. The Community tab also enables really exciting mobile live streaming opportunities. So this is a great moment in YouTube's history because what we've done is we've brought onto our platform these new mediums for creative expression while keeping video front and center, and also by leaning into the essence of our platform, which is the interaction between our creators and their audience, their fans. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to exemplify the UX research process that we follow at YouTube with the research that we've conducted for the Community tab. And I'll come back to it later, and I'm going to deep dive into the method that we follow. But I want to start by showing you a photo of what a UX research session in the context of the Community tab looks like. So I know it's probably not what you expected me to show. On the left side, that's John Green. He's a YouTube creator. On the right side, that's me. Everyone else is part of the YouTube product team. And I know it looks like we're at a party, but we're at a UX research session. I mean, yes, it's a rooftop party, but it's also a UX research session. And what I want to do today is I want to explain to you why this photo, why this party, is at the core of what I do at YouTube. So I'll come back to this photo later. But in order for you to understand what it is why this photo is so important, I need to tell you the 3-year journey that led to that party. And so let's go back in time 3 years. At the time, I was working at a design agency as a user experience researcher in San Francisco. And what I was doing there is I was conducting research for a broad range of clients and across many different industries. And although I really loved my job, I was beginning to feel that impatience that you have when you start to feel like it's time for a new adventure, and I just didn't know what that new adventure would be. And so in the middle of this job hunting process, one Saturday morning, I was doing what I've done for many, many years. I was not looking for a job. I was binge watching YouTube videos. I've been a fan of YouTube since its very beginning, since 2005. And I've followed some YouTubers' careers from very early on up to this day. And so I remember that Saturday morning thinking, I spend so much time watching YouTube. I wonder if they'd pay me to do this. And they did. So, lesson 1, it doesn't hurt to ask. But what I want to talk about is that's what eventually brought me to YouTube. But in that process of thinking, well, what's my next adventure? It's a very introspective process because you want to understand what you're passionate about, what you want to be doing. And so I was haunted at the time by this question: why is UX research valuable? And I thought to share this with you because I think that as UX professionals, we've all had to deal with this question in one form or another, right? Because in my previous job as a UX consultant, we would have to deal with this question all the time because we would come in, and many times this was the first exposure to UX methods that our clients had. And a lot of times the decision to hire us didn't come from the people who we actually had to work with. So we would come in and the question would always be, why are you here? What can you bring to our team? And so I've had to think about this a lot. If you've been lucky enough to not encounter this question in the context of an inquisitive, sometimes skeptical client, you might have dealt with this in the context of friends and family who are definitely confused about what we do for a living. Because when you say you're a lawyer or you're a doctor, society has kind of like built stereotypes of what those careers look like. And so people kind of guess what you do, but with UX, people look confused. And finally, if you haven't encountered it socially or professionally, I think that at an industry gathering like this one, it's relevant that we question our own praxis and that we say, well, what do we bring to our teams that we could not accomplish without us? And at its most basic, the answer to this question is that the context in which our products are built is different from that of our users. And so unless you're building products for yourself and exclusively for yourself, it's very likely that the context in which your product is being used is very different from that of its creation. And that translates into the fact that the behaviors and needs of your users aren't always visible from the place where your product teams are setting their strategy and also allocating their resources. And so that's where we come in. And by we, I mean UX professionals in general and researchers specifically. We build the bridge between these two contexts. And it's about this bridge that I want to talk today. Because I had an understanding of this bridge when I came to YouTube And now 3 years later, that understanding has completely changed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what I thought that UX research bridge was when I first came to YouTube, and then I'm going to show you what I think that UX bridge is today. I thought research is about 3 roles. It's a team that needs to understand a user, or a client that needs to understand a user, a participant that I'll recruit that is hopefully representative of that user base, or at the very least, a good proxy to that user base. And then in the middle, I'm the researcher. I'm the interface between these 2 realities. But the truth is, there are more interfaces between these actors. Because between me as a researcher and my participant, I set a research method. And what I do is I plan my encounter with my research participants. So the research method dictates how I'm going to interact with them. And between me and my team, I set up documentation. And this can be a very heavyweight process or a very lightweight process. But what we're trying to do is leave a trace of what we've done so that we can then look back to it and use it for future reference, and also to facilitate the collaboration between us. So this is the bridge that I had when I came to YouTube, and here's how information flows in this model. It starts with a team that has needs. And so you look at those needs, and that could be from a foundational to a tactical research ask. It doesn't matter what it is. What you do is you look at those needs and you propose research questions, right? And those research questions will set the agenda for everything else that'll happen throughout this process. And then as a researcher, as a scientist, what you do is, to the best of your knowledge at the time, you propose hypotheses of potential answers for those research questions. And with those hypotheses, you then set out to figure out what the best research method is going to be for you to either prove or disprove those hypotheses. And then, once you have your hypotheses and your research method, you prepare prompts that you're going to give to your participant to elicit responses from them. And I want to pause here for a second, because it's really important that we're aware of the fact that when we bring research participants in, the only part of the product development cycle that they see are the research prompts. And this will be relevant when we revisit this from YouTube's perspective. So what you get back from those prompts is participant data. And that data, we sometimes call it feedback, sometimes it's actual data. And because we followed a research method, that data will have a structure. What this means is that going into a research activity, we have a reasonable expectation of what the data we're going to get looks like. What we do next is that we look at that data and we offer an interpretation. We offer a reading. And when we share that with our teams through some form of documentation, and this doesn't mean that it's an actual document, what we're giving them back are insights. So this process, spoilers, what this process does is that your team shows you their needs and you send back polished insights. Now, there's 2 things that I want to call out. The first one is this arrow that I just brought to the slide. And it's that this research bridge is optimized for information to flow from left to right, from participant to product team. And I'll come back to that when we discuss YouTube. The second thing that I want to point out is that crossing this bridge back and forth takes time. When you turn needs into questions, questions into hypotheses, and hypotheses into prompts, you're planning research, and that takes time. When you're looking at data, you're interpreting that data and turning it into insights, you're doing analysis. And you could argue that at the core of what we do as researchers, we plan research and we analyze the results. The problem is that when we are in the middle of this bridge, our participant is out there, our users are out there, busy living their lives, and our teams are out there busy at work. And what that means is that the more time we spend in the middle of the bridge, the less time we spend bridging these two realities that are not static, so they keep moving. They're moving targets. And that's why so much of the UX literature and so much of what we've discussed here in Santiago over the last 3 days is about how to cross this bridge iteratively and go back and forth quickly so that we can keep doing it, right? So when I thought before coming to YouTube, what is the value of UX research? My answer would be this, that the bridge we build, we add to that bridge scientific rigor, scientific method, that especially in the context of consultancy, I felt the need that the more scientific I could be, the more perfect my work could be. And of course, I thought we were cool scientists because we replaced the lab coat with hoodies. But, and that's the explanation of us thinking of ourselves as researchers, that why so many of us have academic backgrounds, right? We have the graduate education that goes with that. We have masters and PhDs, and we've published peer-reviewed articles. Because we think of ourselves as researchers. And so it's with this understanding, we think of ourselves as researchers, of course, but we think of ourselves as scientists. And it's with this model in my head that I came to YouTube. And here's where I need to pause and talk about the users that I came to work with, which are YouTube creators. So I'm part of the team that understands our creators worldwide. And so to do that, I'm really passionate about YouTube creators, so I could talk for hours about it, but I won't, don't worry. I'm just gonna say two things. The first one is that I wanna encourage you to go to YouTube and find a YouTube creator that aligns with your interests, so something that you're into. And follow them for a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months. But don't just watch their videos, pay attention to how they articulate communities around their channels. To illustrate this and to potentially give you a bit of a catalog of where to choose from, I'm gonna play a video which is called YouTube Rewind. And this is a yearly video that we release, which is a celebration of two things. The first one is that it's a celebration of all the videos that year went viral. And so all those videos that kept us coming back to watch over and over again. The second thing is that it's a celebration of all the YouTube creators that make our platform magical. Now 2015, which is I'm going to play a small segment of this video. 2015 was a very special YouTube Rewind, and it was in general a very special year for YouTube because it was our 10th anniversary. And so in the segment that I'm going to play, we invited current YouTube creators to reenact viral videos that were landmarks throughout our 10 years of history. So I'm going to play the video and see if you can recognize any of these videos that our creators are spoofing.
Should we do it?
Let's do it.
Do you recall long ago when you would walk on the sidewalk? Innocent, remember, all we did was care for each other. But the night was warm, we were bold and young. All around, the window, we would only hold on to
And I
let
know
go.
she'll be the death of me, at least we'll both know. And she'll always get the best of me, the worst is yet to come.
What do you mean? Oh, when you nod your head yes, but you wanna say no, what do you mean?
So did you recognize any of those videos, right? Diet Coke and Mentos, History of Dance, Charlie Bit My Finger. So I'm playing this video because I want you to think of the fact that every person who's featured in this video, and you can go back to YouTube and watch the whole 10-minute video. is a YouTube creator who is engaging an audience that will range anywhere from thousands to many millions of people. And when I joined YouTube, this was the population, this was the group of users that I would call my research subjects. And so let's head back to the original bridge model. The level of investment that our YouTube creators have on our platform and the level of engagement that they have makes it hard for me to have a purist approach to the scientific method. Because our research participants are first and foremost our business partners, and their success is our success, and our success is their success. And so when they get a call from me or an email saying, hey, it's YouTube here, I want you to come and be part of our research, our users inevitably bring their own agenda. And I don't see this as a disadvantage. It's actually very humbling to see how much our users care about our platform. Because they come and they want to get a peek behind the curtain, and they want to have a normal conversation with a human being. And so here's the main shortcoming of this model in a context where your users are highly engaged. And it's the two things that I pointed out. The information flow is optimized from left to right. It's not a two-way communication channel. And also, we limit the conversation, we limit the interaction through our research method. And so here is where me coming to YouTube as a fan first and as a researcher second, and I'm unapologetically proud of that, comes into play. Because I would come to work and I would conduct research this way, but because inside I was freaking out that I had the opportunity to meet these people that I admired so much, that have inspired me so much, I had a genuine interest in our research participants outside of the context of our research sessions. And that led to many personal friendships. And what that meant is that whenever we would do research, we would also try and build in some social time for us to just hang out. And because creators live all around the world, I would travel with my product team to meet with them, and I would often invite my coworkers to come and socialize with our creators. And that's where I started noticing something magical. And I started noticing that more and more product team members were interested in coming to these research trips, not so much because of the actual research session, but because of this social space that we were creating for them to talk directly to our users. And so what this originated is that it enabled a speed that we never had before. Because I eventually got rid of the notion of an observation room. Everyone's in the same room. Everyone can talk to each other. I'm not going to limit what the interaction with the user is. And because my team is more engaged, they're not just taking notes, they're being part of the conversation. The insight process is way faster, and they can just jump straight into action and jump into action by shipping better product. And so this led me to rethink this bridge. And I want to show you how I think of this bridge today, now that I've been at YouTube for 3 years. I no longer think of my research method as the interface between me and my participant. I think of my research method as the placeholder, as the safe space for these three roles to meet each other. And at the heart of this encounter are insights. But in this model, insights are not the polished thing that I deliver at the end of research. Insights are a collective narrative that everyone in that room builds. And that reshapes my our interactions with our participants and our team. Because my job now in this model with my participant is to build rapport, to make sure that when a participant comes into a room full of strangers, they don't feel like they're strangers. They understand who they are, what they're trying to do. And my job is not to have the conversation with my participant. My job is for my team to have a conversation with my participant, and I facilitate. And so my role in this room with regards to my team is that I help them interpret. I help them navigate the conversation. Yes, at times that does mean that I put my scientist's hat on and I will stop a leading question, but it's no big deal. You just say, hey, why don't we ask it this other way instead? And what you notice when you do this enough is that your product team begins to think as a researcher. And more often than not, I'm surprised by how well product managers and engineers ask questions in the exact way that I would have asked them had I been following a scientific method. And what that means is that as a researcher, I'm not holding my cards close to my chest. I'm sharing my bag of tricks with my team, and I'm helping non-researchers think as researchers. So this diagram has every element of that original bridge except for one: documentation. So documentation was that interface between me and my team. And in this model, documentation, I placed it kind of outside of the model. It's there, it overlaps, but it's not at the heart of it. Because in this model, documentation isn't about scientifically capturing everything that we've done, every data point, and every insight. It's much more about constructing an interesting story that captures the richness of the conversation between a team and their users. So what I do is I craft stories. I don't document every aspect. I don't document every insight. Because as I said, insights are no longer my creation. They're a co-creation. And they're a collective narrative that is owned by everyone who participates in these conversations. Now notice that by thinking of research in this way, we've restructured what it means to be a research participant. Because in this model, information isn't flowing from participant to team. Information is flowing in both directions. And so what we're enabling is for the participant to be a product stakeholder. Participants can help product teams make decisions, can understand the product development cycle that they're part of, that they're generously helping improve, and they can closely co-develop products with our product teams. So this is the research world that I live in today. Shifting from research participants to product stakeholders enables exciting opportunities for co-development. Because not only are you inviting a participant to come share their experiences and to pick their brain, you're actually inviting them to take active ownership over the products they use and they love. So let's go back to the community tab where I started. As I said, we launched in September, and we're currently in a beta process with 12 creators. And now those 12 creators aren't 12 creators that we randomly selected the night before we launched. They are 12 creators who have been actively helping us build this feature and determine what the right feature set is. And 12 creators might sound like a pretty small-scale experiment, but their overall reach, just those 12 creators, is more than 40 million subscribers. So here are the Vlog Brothers. They're Hank and John Green, aka the Vlog Brothers. They're very influential in the YouTube community. And they're not our research participants. They're our product stakeholders. We not only listen to them very carefully, we're actually accountable to them in terms of what our progress is and how our product cycle is moving forward. So let's go back to that photo. On the left is John Green. On the right, that's me, and I'll pause to acknowledge that I don't look my best, but it's the only photo I had. But I'm really proud of this photo, even if it's my worst photo. No, I have a driver's license. Because it's a real-life representation of that Venn diagram that I showed you. A research participant, a researcher, and then everyone else in that photo is part of the product team that is actively working to building and shipping the community tab. In that photo, there's product managers, there's engineers, there's UX designers and UX researchers, all interacting directly. Now you could say, well, okay, you had a conversation. It was way more than a conversation. Our engineers were pulling out prototypes on their phones, giving John updates on what we were doing, and listening to his feedback and listening to his new ideas. And the speed at which this moves is amazing. I'll say here that, I should have said it earlier, this photo was taken at VidCon, and VidCon is a yearly convention in Anaheim, California, that was actually started by Hank and John Green. And this year, more than 25,000 community members and creators gathered there to hang out together for 3 days. And so we arranged this meeting to happen and to give John an update. And I want to show you what I mean by speed. This is the following morning, and this is the hotel room of those two engineers that you actually saw in the previous photo. And what they're doing is that following morning, they're working on implementing experiments and changes to adapt to what John just said to them. And take a moment to think about how long it would have taken had I been acting as the central piece of the telephone game. Had I been there saying, well, I'm running this, you can listen, but wait for me to send out a research report, or let's organize a debrief session. Another example of these 12 creators that are helping us build the community tab, Threadbanger. More than 3 million subscribers. They're a do-it-yourself or craft channel. And their hosts, Rob and Corinne, have been longtime partners in product development with YouTube. And I want to show you what their content looks like, and I apologize in advance, there's some swear words, but they're beeped.
Rob, you're watching Man vs. Pin, the show where you suggest pins from Pinterest, and then I try to recreate them without looking like a complete and utter tool bag.
Corinne here, and you're watching Corinne vs. Pin. Today, we're making all of the things. This should totally work, right?
What's up? Welcome to Man vs. Science, the show where we find awesome science projects on the internet and then try to recreate them without a hint of scientific knowledge. You've seen them. Pins out there that look like a bunch of horse shit.
What the heck?
Well, it doesn't really look like the picture, does it? Yep, that's right. You have all been lied to. Hornswoggled again! Angelina Mai has been suggesting this pin for months. It's the Autumn Leaf Bowl. Pinometer, what do you think? Oh shit. Once I got them all on, well, that was pretty much it. I grabbed the sharp object, popped the balloon, and... What the fuck just happened? This isn't right. Is this supposed to happen?
So I wanted to show you that video because, for 3 reasons. The first one is that I love Rob and Corinne, and they make me laugh. And I've loved them since before I joined YouTube, since even before I knew them, and they were my friends. The second one is I think you should all pull out your phones and subscribe and watch their videos. But the third one is that it's a really interesting example of how Rob and Corinne incorporate their audience in their content. As you saw there, their audience is submitting projects for them to test and to show whether it's possible or not to do it. And so when we approached them and said, hey, we're thinking of this idea of, it wasn't called the community tab then, but we're thinking of this system for you to interact with your audience outside of just the single video watch page, they were really excited, and they've been helping us out from day one. And so this is one of the very early design sprints for the community tab. And what you see in this photo is Rob and Corinne from Threadbanger, and then one of our product managers and one of our UX designers. And what they're doing, this is at the end of day one of a 2-day design sprint in LA, and what they're doing is they're pitching to Rob and Corinne ideas that they just came up with. And so as they talk, they're kind of figuring out the details, and Rob and Corinne are filling in the blanks. In further iterations of this, we've actually done it with, we've invited YouTube creators to come work with us at our office, sometimes for as much as a week. And this enables two things. The first one, and I've said it many times now, it's speed, and also this direct connection between our product team and our creators. I'm not there mediating. And also, the second thing is an understanding on our user side of how we operate at YouTube and how we build the product that they use every day. Another example of this is another research session at VidCon. And I want you to focus on the two gentlemen in the middle who were here in Chile, so I thought I'm going to show a Chilean example. And you might not recognize them, but if I say walkie-talkie, yes, do we know them? Right? Yes. And the way this worked is that I bumped into them at VidCon and I said, hey, I have this really exciting thing to show you. Come meet our team. And that allowed for their feedback as Chilean creators to be integrated into the final product. And I want to show you one last example. And I want to talk about documentation. And I want to show you with an example what I mean by documentation is more about crafting a story than it is about being a scientist. Last year, my team and I got the opportunity to go to Comic-Con in New York, and we got to walk the floor for 2 days, talking to people, trying to understand what it means to be a fan of something. And so instead of then documenting this process with a research deck or a research report, what we did is we turned this into a 10-minute audio story, like a podcast. And so what I did for today is I'm going to play a 1-minute condensed version of the first part of that. So at times, bear with me because it does jump a little, but that's because I wanted to keep it down to a minute. And so let's listen to it, and then I'll tell you why I think this is interesting.
This is what the floor of the New York Comic Con sounds like. If you've never been to Comic-Con, think VidCon on steroids. We came to Comic-Con because we wanted to talk to people about what it means to be a fan. It might be useful to try and understand what drives someone to spending a lot of time building a costume and showing up at a convention with another 150,000 people who are all dressed up as different characters from movies, comic books, and TV shows. We kept asking people why they were there, and there seemed to be a very universal response to this. Let's go back to the Tetris box people.
It's a good way to just be yourself when everybody thinks that you're weird. This is the one place that you can be normal and everybody's normal with you. And everybody else outside, all of them, they're weird.
And she's right. After hours walking around the Comic-Con floor, we started feeling out of place.
It's interesting that being dressed in normal street clothes makes me feel so out of place.
Yeah, it's weird. Who's the weirdo now?
It's definitely us.
So the day was coming to an end, and we were getting ready to head home.
Oh, weird.
And to be totally honest with you guys.
And so then the audio clip goes on to tell the story of our encounter with Iron Man and this cosplay participant who really gave us a window. We ended up spending about 3 hours with him at Comic-Con, and he gave us a really interesting window into what drives you to build that costume. And so if you listen to that, you can tell what I mean by it's not about the science. It's about telling our team members who couldn't be there with us what happened and adding this story of Iron Man to the collective narrative that we have at YouTube and that we use as insights to build better products. So I hope these 4 examples give you an idea of the change that happened from going from the model on the left to the model on the right. Because my answer to what makes UX research valuable has changed. I no longer think of ourselves as hoodie-wearing scientists. I think of us as builders and owners of spaces where these 2 contexts can meet and where these 2 contexts can comfortably interact in a 2-way conversation that is mutually beneficial. And what that conversation does is that it leads to a collective narrative that are insights that we're going to use to ship better product. I think this model is good news for the UX community. Whether you're in a context where there's a robust UX presence, so maybe you're part of a large team and you do a lot of UX work, or whether you're in a context where there may not be any UX presence and maybe you came to this conference because you care about the topic and you want to learn more. I think it's great that we can say that the value of research is not that we are scientists, that the value of research is that we can collectively build insights. And I know that I'm talking from the perspective of a company that has highly engaged users, and we know we're very lucky to have that. So I just want to wrap this conversation by inviting you to start thinking about what a safe space for product teams and users to interact with looks like in whatever context you work. And go out and build that space. Bring your users in. Have everyone at your company talk to your users. And as a researcher, be there to facilitate, but don't be there to be the telephone game. I wish you the best of luck and keep me posted how it goes.